I'm hunting for demons. And in this area lives two beasts. It's said that every 2 years when the moon turns red, then the stars align. From Software fans will start to argue which is better, Bloodborne or Dark Souls. This arguing manifests itself in the good place as the two beasts getting ready for combat. Dark Souls didn't start the show, but it popularized it, taking the formula of Demon Souls and replaced Demon Souls with the word dark. As far as this narrative is concerned, it was the first to bring this style of game, placing the importance on the challenge, and it was slow, it was esoteric, and it was hard, and then everybody played it. But joking and generalization aside, Dark Souls was part of a moment in gaming where we began breaking away from the easy games of the time. Once Dark Souls took the idea of Demon Souls and polished them, it managed to catch fire in the video game industry. This raw piece of gaming was the perfect boy fantasy, giving you a wall and a spoon and telling you to enjoy it, which is something guys actually want in the greater scheme of things. So yeah, basically Dark Souls wasn't just a big deal, it was a paradigm shift. And like Doom clones of the past came the era of comparing everything to Dark Souls. Which is weird, as Dark Souls is often looked at as the first and best when it's neither. In Dark Souls we have the big bang of Souls-likes, a newish sort of video game format all about risk, discipline, honesty, and maybe even honor. It would only get better as the game genre went on. From Software had blessed us with some of the best and greatest video games, most recently Elden Ring. Of course, Dark Souls would go on to spawn its own trilogy. So I'll just be direct about it and say that Bloodborne is better than everything else From Software has done. As far as this narrative is concerned, the only other title that can contest it other than Elden Ring is Dark Souls. So in a way, the real Dark Souls 2, no disrespect to the actual Dark Souls 2, but from a successor perspective to the original Dark Souls, regardless of the actual series that Dark Souls went on to spawn, Bloodborne was that next step. I'm gonna argue, so why is Bloodborne better than Dark Souls? Elden Ring is obviously the peak of the From Software games. It's literally a level up from a level up. These previous levels being Dark Souls and Bloodborne. Bloodborne literally being born out of the blood of Dark Souls, as the ideas had a while to settle in Miyazaki's head. Sure, Dark Souls is bigger, more muscle and fat can obviously generate more power, collectively bigger than Bloodborne, who is one game trapped in the PS4 by itself. But Bloodborne is way tighter and elegant, taking all the ideas from Dark Souls 1 and literally melts the fat out of them. No foreplay, no bandwidth, just critical greatness along with a healthy dose of innovation. Dark Souls vs Bloodborne is so interesting because of the way they were made. You see, after the success of Dark Souls, it was clear this was gonna become From Software's cash cow. And so as more Dark Souls games came out, they didn't really add a whole lot to the format. Dark Souls games weren't used as a creative outlet so much so as a commercial endeavor. By the time Dark Souls 3 had come out, most of its innovations were influenced by Bloodborne, because the CJ of the company had to come back and fix Dark Souls after Dark Souls 2 couldn't get it. Elden Ring from the rest of the From Software games should up its own identity and lore, but basing its gameplay on building directly on top of old foundation. Elden Ring is basically Dark Souls 3 and everything but story and lore. And then I would argue that most lore from these games have themes so similar that even then story differences don't offer too much to chew on. It doesn't take a lot of analysis to figure out why Miyazaki is basically the golden geese from Software, a man that basically stands next to Hideo Kojima himself, and it's often his artistic vision that ends up shaping these games at the end, directly or indirectly. Regardless of how you look at From Software, Miyazaki is a clear through line. Switching gears for a bit, I want to talk about the idea of spiritual successors. Ideally, when you strike it big with a title, the monetary sound decision will be to start work on a sequel. And so with the success of whatever Miyazaki would put his hands on after King Profit, once From Software capitalized on it. Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Dark Souls 3, Elden Ring, Demon Souls, Sekiro, Miyazaki was allowed to continue to innovate his vision with fresh creative canvases, and then From Software would sell those along with similar pieces following the same rules as the original. Even though most of his worlds aren't connected, considering the similarities and flexible lore, most fans have considered the possibility of a joint universe. I myself personally believe it, as to me, most From Software games make what I call Dark Zelda, and that's what I refer to as this kind of cyclical game framed around mythology to basically create an anthology machine for super critical games. Getting back to the topic of the video, Bloodborne is better, but as a PlayStation exclusive will always be more obscure, which I think works for his favor. Removed from Dark Souls, Bloodborne acted as Miyazaki's next artistic progression outside of the series, which made it feel ironically felt more like Dark Souls than Dark Souls 2, because in a sense Dark Souls 2 acted more as an advancement of commercial interest, but in terms of critical integrity, Bloodborne is a whole different beast. In the PS4, it still holds a cult of a fan base, and I regularly worship play every 2 months. Somehow capturing the design of Dark Souls with its slow design and its crushing difficulty, but making it overall faster, better optimized, and properly structured, Bloodborne is a Lovecraftian story about evolution and humanity's ascension into possible godhood. More specifically, a story about killing beasts and through the form of the old blood, leveling up through killing more powerful things, which is on track for a From Software game. But in a meta level, From Software likes to build on top of the ideas of past success. The success of Bloodborne affected later titles' sense of speed, which we see in games like Dark Souls 3 and Sekiro. Retroactively, Dark Souls 2 didn't actually advance much after the first, and carrying over the speed from Miyazaki's new Bloodborne made Dark Souls 3 feel more connected and more realized. Some games to me act as a means to create success, and some act as a ways to advance Miyazaki's artistic vision. I don't even say this as a bad thing, as art has to be allowed to rework itself in order to function. Like a person maturing, art needs to also get rid of traits and habits that don't help it. I attribute lots of From Software success in the fluidity it shows. While it would be dumb not to make another Dark Souls games, wouldn't it be dumb to also stick our creative genius behind a creatively stagnant game franchise? From Software instead decided to split resources and gently move Miyazaki around to maximize both his experience points and monetary gain. His experiences will also help with their artistic stagnation, letting his new artistic innovation lead new success and new game styles. A lot of people consider Dark Souls 3 the peak of these games, when I feel most of the advancements of the game happened back in Bloodborne. I would attribute Dark Souls 3's success to Bloodborne's artistic breakthroughs. In order to gain evolution, you must let go, and not everything has to be a Dark Souls game to accomplish great success like From Software. Art is an ever-evolving process that we use as a way to reflect upon our growth. It's weird to think about games and concepts maturing with us, but I think that's the difference between companies that want to give us art and also make money, rather than just make money. Without a new fire, things begin to feel hollow, and that's why I feel I always want to play the next series where Miyazaki gets to start fresh. Bloodborne as a fresh start allowed him to artistically improve his vision, taking away from his creative sandbox of Dark Souls games, and creating a world of similar existential horrors, only this time it's with a more direct Lovecraftian approach, and I think that kind of makes for the best setting. Imagine my nerdy heart when I found out this style of game was gonna be made into a Lovecraftian fantasy. It's very fitting From Software game, and in fact this simple combination has made this game one of my favorites, but its design has taken it to even higher, to being my second favorite game of all time, and one of my personal favorite examples of what this medium can accomplish. If you ever wanted a better way to relate to gaming, try to view a game like an album, and here we have what I view as an example of art that is meant to act as a video game first. The author sparked great success from Dark Souls, but it was on Bloodborne that he actually took his next step towards his creative vision, in my opinion. And it's my personal perspective that this vision is the most clear in Bloodborne. Dark Souls managed to make it commercially viable, but Bloodborne represents critical appeal first over sales. It's funny, as the more I look out into the world, the more I see a sort of transitional period between ideas, peoples, and even laws. And I see things change over time. Most of the time, change brings out the best of us. But just like Demon Souls, it made the way for Dark Souls. And even if it wasn't as successful, Dark Souls made the way for Bloodborne. And if anything, I think Bloodborne's success over Dark Souls only proves how true success isn't a secret or even something you're given. True success is effort and repetition, getting better and building on top of your past works, and your ideas eventually spawning new, stronger, and even better ones. And eventually the old ideas get even eaten up over time. As such is the law of time. Time, maybe death might change into a new age of fire. But yo, those are all my thoughts, and thank you. Thank you, especially if you actually watched the whole video. I really appreciate that. Makes me feel all types of good things. You want to see more, like and subscribe, and yeah, that would be all. Stay safe.